Hey everyone, I'm Rod Roddenberry, and you're listening to Trek FM.
Hello and welcome to Stage 9, Trek FM show about the people who make Star Trek. I'm Mike.
I'm John.
And today we're going to take a look at my personal favorite movie, and I'm sure, we'll find out how much John loves it, whether or not John loves it more than me, by Akiva Goldsman, who is an executive producer and writer on Star Trek Discovery. And that movie is the 1995 masterpiece, Batman Forever. So,
starting early. Okay.
So Batman Forever. This is the third film in the what originated with the Tim Burton, the Burton-verse. It's the first movie to not be directed by Tim Burton and not star Michael Keaton. It was directed by Joel Schumacher, and it stars Val Kilmer as Batman, as well as Jim Carrey as the Riddler, Tommy Lee Jones as Two-Face,
yes,
Chris O'Donnell as Robin,
yes,
and Nicole Kidman as Dr. Chase Meridian.
Yes.
And it was...
And a very fine pursuit indeed, yes.
And it was written by Lee Batchelor, Janet Scott Batchelor, and Akiva Goldsman.
Yeah, ampersand on the first two names, and the word "and" on Akiva Goldsman.
Yeah, and they're credited, the Batchelors are credited with the story as well, so theoretically they wrote the early drafts, and then Goldsman was brought on to rewrite at some point. That's what it seems to be. And Goldsman has written a lot of movies, but this was very early on in his career. He had written two movies which came out the year before, Silent Fall and The Client, which was another Joel Schumacher movie, and then this came out in 95, so it's only his third movie. Do you want to give a synopsis of this movie?
Oh, I sure do, Mike.
Okay,
I sure do. We find ourselves in a Gotham City that has recuperated from its ordeals with Joker, Catwoman, and Penguin, and found itself in the middle of a DayGlo Nightmare at the hands of Two-Face, also known as Harvey Dent, a half-purple Tommy Lee Jones with some interesting fashion choices. And Batman swings in, blah, 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 and then Jim Carrey becomes the Riddler. And as we love to say on this show, hijinks ensue. Mm-hmm. And we have a new third love interest for the third movie with Batman and / Bruce Wayne, spoilers. And, basically the antics of going around and trying to protect Gotham from two supervillains who fall into league with each other after the Riddler discovers that he can suck brain power out of people.
Yes. Okay, so here's my question for you, first and foremost.
Yes.
Do you remember seeing this movie for the first time?
You betcha I do.
Do you remember the exact circumstances, or can you describe?
Yes, I was actually in a movie theater in Williamsburg, Virginia. Not Colonial Williamsburg, because they don't have movie theaters in Colonial Williamsburg, because that would not be time period accurate. And so we were in Greater Williamsburg, and I was visiting my cousins, and we went and we saw Batman Forever, because my brother and I are both big Batman fans. And I remember seeing it in the theater, and I remember being somewhat silent afterward, and my cousin, Julie, asking me, like, looking at me and saying, "So did you like it?" And I remember looking at her and saying, "Yeah, actually I did. That was fun. It was a bit lighter than Batman Returns. I had a good time." And that was my first. What was your first experience seeing it?
Well, my first experience, I mean, I guess here's my question. You were a fan of the Burton Batman movies?
Oh, very much so. I even my enthusiasm to defend Batman Returns has fallen off greatly in the most recent years, because as I've revisited it, I found that it didn't hold up as well as I thought it would. But the phrase I used to love saying was that Batman Returns was a Freudian psychodrama as a comic book, but I adored the 1989 Batman. I mean, nostalgically, I still adore it. I still think it's a fantastic movie and terrific fun to watch. So yes, I was a huge fan of the series.
Yeah, I was 15 when Batman Forever came out. I had just kind of discovered comics with like the death of Superman, basically. And I had been hanging out at a comic book store very, very frequently. And as an extension of sort of like my love for Batman, which, happened with, it was weird. Like the thing that got me hooked on Batman was Nightfall, the Bane story.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
But it wasn't the comics. I actually read the novelization that Denny O'Neil wrote.
Nice.
Which came out afterwards. And
not a bad choice.
That was actually, it was really, really helpful because in addition to getting the whole story and sort of like fine-tuned into, like one complete volume, the other thing that it did was obviously it being written for a more mainstream audience, it really had to sort of like lay the groundwork of Batman. And I'm not just talking about, the origin where his parents are shot in the alley, because obviously everyone knows that, but sort of like there's so many characters in Nightfall. Like Two-Face shows up, let's say, and they need to explain who Two-Face is, because in the comics it's just like Two-Face is back. Oh no! But in this book they had to be like Two-Face. Two-Face was a guy who had acid poured on his face, and blah blah blah. And that was actually like really really great. Thinking about it, because it basically gave me all the information that I needed to know about the larger Batman mythology.
Yes.
So that when I started reading the comics, which I did, go back and read the entire Nightfall storyline, and then I continued to read Batman comics for years after that, it really sort of gave me everything that I needed. So, that got me hooked on Batman, and then of course I watched, in addition to the animated series, the Tim Burton Batman movies and everything, and I really did love those. And because of that, I was really looking forward to Batman Forever. And I was just starting to get into movies. Generations had just come out a few months prior, and that was the first movie that I was ever like actively anticipating, went to see on opening night. And the second movie was Batman Forever. I was counting down the days. I had this amazing T-shirt with like the question mark with the bat logo in the middle, which now you can get off of Warner Brothers website again. I need to get that shirt. Things like that. I had posters up in my walls and everything. Sure. I could not wait to see this movie, And everyone who worked at the comic book store, all my friends were making fun of me because they're like, those Tim Burton movies are garbage. The only real Batman is, Mask of the Phantasm, whatever. And,
they did have a compelling argument about Mask of the Phantasm.
No, it's true. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
But, it's like you look at the trailers for this and they're like, this is going to be terrible. And like, I remember because I was like, oh yeah, I can't wait. And all of them were like, we're not seeing this movie, it's not happening.
Sure.
But I went to see it opening day. My uncle Don took me and my cousin Steve to the North Riverside Theater. We saw it in Auditorium number 1 on opening day. I remember that my uncle had to buy shoes at JCPenney prior to going to see it. I have no idea why I remember that, but
That's
I do.
A very specific memory.
Yeah. And, I saw it and I loved it. And, I think a lot of that has to do with just how much I was anticipating it. It was the first time I had seen a Batman movie on the big screen. Oh, actually, that's not true, because I went to see Mask of the Phantasm on the big screen. That was the first movie I ever went to by myself as a 13-year-old kid. But I wasn't like a huge Batman fan at that point in time, so it didn't really mean anything to me. But I was just like in total awe of it, and it became like the movie of the summer for me. I went back and I saw it 3 more times. I would took my friends to see it, went to see
Yeah.
it by myself, everything. And then when the Laserdisc came out, I got that, and I watched that a million times, and yes, it was a really, really, really big part of my summer. And
Yeah, absolutely.
even though everyone was like trashing it, and I, my take on it was sort of like, one of the big criticisms that the comic book guys had about the Burton Batmans is that it was too dark in the sense of, the character of Batman, mainly the fact that he kills, and he kills a lot of people in those movies.
He does. He's rather ruthless in his tactics.
And while Batman Forever lightens up the tone quite a bit, it almost seems like it lightens it up to the point of where it should be in terms of the comics.
Well, see, this is the difficult thing, and I think that Batman Forever is I think it's a really critical point in terms of the understanding of comic book movies, especially by studios and by fans, what they wanted. The 90s saw, I think, a very fertile breeding ground for this type of comic book movie. I mean, and you saw a lot of stuff spawned after this, like, the Phantom and the Shadow and stuff like that, which were much lighter takes, where it was the Batman Forever retains enough of that original darkness that you can tell Burton had a hand in developing it. But it's done by somebody with a sensibility and an appreciation informed by actually enjoying the 1960s TV show. And I think that is what makes Batman Forever so unique. I think it's uniquely enjoyable because it's uniquely terrible. Because it's not like putting peanut butter and chocolate together. It's like putting, I don't know, peanut butter and mustard together. I like mustard and I like peanut butter, but these don't feel right together. This doesn't taste right to me. This doesn't quite work for me. And it's one of those things where, you might get a bite where there's more peanut butter in it. You're like, okay, I can work with this. And then you get, the edge only has mustard on. You're like, okay, I like mustard. But then when you get the two really right up against each other, for instance, the Two-Face in the circus scene, that's where you get a big mouthful of both. And that really leads to a very unpleasant reaction.
Yeah.
Like in 95, I did enjoy it. I think a lot of people enjoyed it in the moment, not just because of the anticipation, but because people were ready for something that was lighter in tone. And it was right when Jim Carrey's star, it wasn't just rising. I mean, it was meteorically streaking across the entertainment sky. So it's, and it's 2 hours of Jim Carrey. It was really why people were tuning in. And he's still fun. He's still a great deal of fun to watch in the movie. Yeah, the Jim Carrey thing, I don't know. I was not a big Jim Carrey fan back then. I thought that, things like, I'd see like trailers and stuff for things like Ace Ventura, and I'd just be like, that is not my type of humor. I am, It's dumb fun, but he still had a lot of cred because of his turns as like Fire Marshal Bill on In Living Color. Mm-hmm. And stuff like that. Like he had earned a lot of goodwill by being on that show.
Yeah.
Because he was really, he was one of the stars of that show. And he continued appearing on it after his movie star he honored his contract, basically, which I don't think he would see. He didn't pull a Chevy Chase, in other words. Mm-hmm. So I think that even if you didn't like Ace Ventura, which I think is just, silly, I haven't watched it in many years, but I remember, it's just him doing funny faces and falling in shark tanks and stuff like that. And it's like, it's just childish humor, but it's still, he was on his way to becoming a big star at the time.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And that was like a big selling point, for the movie. I mean, Jim Carrey was certainly, I think, the biggest name in that movie. And that was actually something where I was sort of like, it was a deterrent for me. Like, that was the first thing where I was like, I don't know if that's a good idea. The casting of Tommy Lee Jones, I was like, well, it's weird that Billy D. Williams isn't in this movie.
Yeah.
But I guess if you're not going to have Billy D. Williams in this movie and you're just casting Two-Face, just, as a character, like, I thought that was like a great choice because, the thing that I was most familiar with was, The Fugitive, obviously,
Right.
which he just won an Oscar for.
And that's essentially what got him the role, was
Yeah.
they wanted to have, a big name in it. And I mean, Val Kilmer's a big name too.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that a worthwhile note is the story has not remained consistent through the years, but basically the way I've always heard the story is that it was in development, and then Keaton met with Schumacher and basically said, "No, I'm good. I'm out.
Yeah.
I'm not sticking with this one." And he saw his opening, and he saw the direction Schumacher was going to take it, and he was like, "No, I'm good. You can get somebody else."
Yeah. And Kilmer, I mean, you say like, oh, Val Kilmer's going to play Batman, and I'm like, oh, I like that casting. Whereas like if you say Michael Keaton's going to play Batman, I'm like, what? Wait, why? That's so weird.
There was a huge fan revolt back in '89.
Yeah,
people were insisting they weren't going to go see Batman because Michael Keaton was cast in it, and Burton was the one that was like, no, trust me, he can pull this off, he can do it.
Yeah, and Kilmer, he does not really have much to do in this movie at all.
Very true.
Yeah, but I was really disappointed with Tommy Lee Jones in this movie. I don't think that it's necessarily Jones's fault. I think it's the way that the character was portrayed. But, coming off of like the comics, I was a really big fan of Two-Face. He was one of my favorite characters in the comics.
Same.
And, then to see this up on screen, I'm just like, that doesn't work at all. That's not how I envision this character. And I think that a lot of that was sort of like informed by the presence of Jim Carrey as the Riddler.
It was. It was.
I mean, Riddler is a character which I could not care less about one way or the other. But Jim Carrey obviously just took it into Jim Carrey land. And, it is what it is.
Yes. But even... Well, I mean, Jim Carrey is essentially playing the Joker in green in a large sense.
Yeah.
And I think that Tommy Lee Jones, there have been plenty of stories about how he did not get along with Jim Carrey at all on set. And I remember reading an interview with Tommy Lee Jones at the time, because even back when I was had a kinder view of the film, and said oh well I do like it, like Two-Face was a sticking point for me. And I remember reading an interview with Tommy Lee Jones, and I think it was shortly before I saw it, where they said, oh, you've won an Oscar. What was it like playing Two-Face, a comic book character? And he essentially said, oh, it's very easy. He's just a simple bifurcated character. And, being the Two-Face fan and the comic book fan that I was, no, that's not him at all.
Yeah.
No, that's not Two-Face at all.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, part of that is just getting rolled into, he didn't want to be upstaged by Carrey.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, okay, so at the time, yes, I did love it, for sure. It was my number one movie that summer and everything like that. I couldn't get enough of it. But obviously, as time has passed, and as various other incarnations of the character have popped up and everything like that, my opinion of it has changed a bit. But I'm curious as to how your opinion has changed of it.
I now regard it in the same category as Starship Troopers, where there's so much awful about it that I enjoy watching it just for the sake of mocking it. There was a trip I took not so long ago where I was hanging out with some people, and the guest of honor, it was the beginning of a week-long trip for him, and the guest of honor said, oh, we're going to watch Batman Forever tonight, because he got to decide whatever anybody watched. And I was like, oh, no. But I stayed there, and I watched the whole thing because we just hacked on it the whole time. And, I can't bring myself to hate it, but I can bring myself to hate watch it. I guess you could say. Just again because it's fun to make fun of, and the early computer graphics and the camera angles with them. John Dykstra should be ashamed of himself. Just gonna say that.
Yeah, that stuff didn't work back in 1995, let alone today. But yeah, for me, I don't know. Like, I definitely I think that if I were to see it today, I'd be like, oh man, this movie's not working. But as a movie which I have grown up with over the years and everything, there's certainly like a nostalgia element to it. But also, like, I can see the things which I really did like back in 95, and those things really do stand out to me as being, quality pieces in a sense, I think that a lot of the action set pieces are really well done. I think that the editing is really solid, and the photography got nominated for an Oscar. I like
that,
the
that actually kind of surprises me.
It is kind of surprising.
I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, but the use of color and everything, and the use of angles and stuff like that, which I think is sort of like a throwback to the 60s TV show.
Isn't the term Dutching the camera?
Yeah, like a Dutch angle. Okay. Yeah, that kind of thing. Doing that, using like the primary colors and stuff from the 66 series, but also making it dark like the new movies. I think that contrast, that combination is really effective, and I think it works. I like the design of the Batmobile and things like that. The set design. I like the fact.
I will admit I like the Batmobile. I'll admit that.
Yeah, and I remember, back then, like I got these shoes just because they were like on sale at Sports Authority, or actually that time it wasn't Sports Authority, it was something else. It was Sports something. Anyway, Sports Mart. I think that's what it was. Sport Mart. Anyway, regardless, they were Andre Agassi shoes, and they were black, and then like the tongue, and like underneath the sort of like the secondary color was like this like aqua blue kind of thing, and they were really comfortable shoes. They were like the best shoes I ever had, and I wish that Nike would re-release them, even though they never have. It's like the Air Tech Challenge LWP or something like that. Anyway, regardless of any of that, none of that matters to the story. The point is that they were black, very sleek black with this aquamarine sort of like tongue and stuff on the sides. And I remember like I was wearing them after seeing the movie, and I was in the comic book store, and my friend Josh saw my shoes, and he's like, I know why you like those shoes so much. They look like the Batmobile.
Well, I can get any defense. I can get any defense of it. I can get the nostalgia angle. I can get the it's the combination of things and stuff like that. But what really I find indefensible about the movie is that score is just awful. Oh my God. It's absolutely awful. If you wanted to put me in a CIA black site and torture me with music, you would tie me to a chair and make me listen to that theme song over and over again. And the thing is, I found out years later, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is the story that I read, was that the whole reason that the soundtrack they released was all rock music was because Schumacher originally only wanted to use a rock and roll soundtrack, but the studio balked and brought in Goldenthal at the last minute, and he created the score in 13 days or something like that. They just threw him in there, and he's like, okay, I can make some music for you. But that theme is terrible. And especially as a Batman fan who loved Elfman's work on the previous two films, to hear that it sets my teeth on edge still to hear it. I don't know why they changed the theme. It doesn't make sense.
I mean, okay, here, let's back this up, because there's like 5 things there, which I don't know. Mm-hmm. I never heard the rock score thing. That I don't.
I read it years ago. I have no idea how accurate it is. But I remember reading it and thinking it made sense.
It sounds like something that makes sense. you know. I wouldn't be surprised by that. As far as, you know, the score itself, I mean, I love Danny Elfman's scores for Batman and Batman Returns for sure. I think they're fantastic. You know, in a lot of ways, I think that, you know, the score for Batman '89 is sort of like the definitive '80s film score. You know, I don't know why. Maybe part of that is the Prince music, which is, you know, interwoven into it or whatever. But that definitely is a great score for sure, and so is Batman Returns. But while it's not the same thing by any stretch of the imagination, I think that the score for Batman Forever is amazing.
No.
You know, like I remember going into
bad.
a record store, you know, when that album, the Batman Forever soundtrack with, you know, Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me, and you know, Kiss from a Rose,
which is a discarded B-side by U2.
Okay,
that was
all
like
right.
laying on their trash heap, and they were like, "We need a song." Yeah, here you go.
It's a good song, but regardless, when that
it is.
When that album was out and everyone was going crazy over that album, I had to go to the CD Exchange. I think was the name of it, or I forget the name of the store. Anyway, it's like a sort of like used new record store, like the hip cool record store in town.
Oh, did they do trade-ins? Did they do credit for your old CDs?
They did trade-ins, but they also had like some weirder stuff. And I was flipping through the soundtracks, and I found the original score, and I took it up to the front, you know, and I'm like, I want this. And they're like, you know, this isn't the one with U2, right? And I'm like, yeah, no, I know, this is the one that I want, you know. And it was amazing. And then just a few months back, they released a deluxe Batman Forever score, like an expanded score with all the stuff on it. It was amazing. Oh my God.
You and I use the word amazing differently, Mike. That much is for sure.
That score is great. But here's the thing about that, right? And the thing that I see, which is sort of like an extension of that, is that unlike movies today where if another director comes onto a series, they try to mimic the style of the director which came before them as much as possible. One of the things that I really like about Batman Forever is that Schumacher got to do his own thing. You know, this is not Schumacher trying to be Burton. It's Schumacher making his version of a Batman movie.
Oh, for sure. And you know, look, I might, you know, I'm rather merciless with it, but I do concede that point. This is his movie. You know, Schumacher made his movie with this. And I think that's you know, win or lose, that's what I'd prefer to see. Like, you know, with all of these different franchise movies that come out, I don't want to go see, you know, like the Marvel Universe stuff. I want to see James Gunn make James Gunn's movie. You know, I want Civil War to look different than Captain America First Avenger. I want the directors to put their own stamp on things, because each movie should be, you know, any film should really be an expression of that director. I mean, yeah, you know, you have the studio system and everything, but in a perfect world, you're bringing a director on because you know that he has some sort of skill set that, you know, it's like, you know, we love to make reference to Empire Strikes Back. All, you know, nerds, geeks, and film lovers do. But, you know, what that conversation between Kershner and Lucas at the very beginning where, you know, Kershner was like, I don't want to make Star Wars. And Lucas said, no, I want you to make something better, you know, and backed off and said, do your thing. This is your movie.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, the thing which is really, you know, interesting is that the studio is probably more accepting of it because of the trajectory that Burton had been going in with Batman. I mean, obviously, the original Batman, you know, hit the exactly, you know, perfect tone from a studio perspective because it made a boatload of money.
Yep.
But, you know, there was a lot of backlash regarding how dark Returns was, you know?
Well,
I mean,
you had the Penguin spitting up green bile while he's drowning to death, being carried by penguins, you know?
Yeah.
It's the stuff of nightmares for a little kid.
Yeah, and there's a lot of innuendo and everything. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in that movie where it's like, whoa, this is for kids, okay, like we're trying to sell Happy Meals, literally. So for
Yeah.
them to sort of like dial it back for this one, and then see a much greater success, I think is interesting. I mean, the problem that we see coming with the next movie, which Goldsman also wrote and Schumacher also directed, is that the studio saw what worked with Forever, and they were like, do that more,
Right.
make it even lighter in tone, and basically make it just like make it a Happy Meal, essentially.
Well, well, I mean, Batman Forever's caught between two worlds. Batman and Robin is just a complete embrace of the '60s TV show. It's the '60s
Yeah.
TV show with a bigger budget and fuller crew.
Yeah, and it doesn't work.
No,
But
not at all. Nor does this one, Mike. Not really.
I think that this one works well. I mean, I would love to see a director's cut. I'd love to see what the original script was like, because there was a lot of stuff which was chopped out of this. But I do love this movie for the nostalgia. But I also think that it does work. I think it is a good movie. It just has some problems in terms of tone, and some problems in terms of maybe being a little too far in one direction, but yes, on the whole, I like it quite a bit.
I would always, and it probably exists or something like that, but I would love nothing more than I would love to have a conversation actually with Akiva Goldsman, because everybody talks to Schumacher about it. Everybody discusses Schumacher. I
Yeah.
want to talk to Goldsman, and I want to say to him, okay, this is your first day. You just walked in. What were you told? What were your guidelines? And how did you meet them? What did
Yeah.
you do to make this movie happen? Because the simple fact that they had something, and then Goldsman's the one that came in and said, okay, this is the movie Mr. Schumacher wants, and this is what we're going to do. I'm dying to know what that first day was like, what that conversation was like, what his guidelines were.
Yeah, yeah, and also, I mean, it's interesting that I'm assuming he had a relationship with Schumacher because of the client.
Yeah.
For Schumacher to say, like, I'm going to bring in Goldsman to to rewrite this thing, if that's what happened, I mean, there aren't many similarities between the client and Batman Forever,
Not a whole
aside
lot,
from
no.
Tommy Lee Jones, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Obviously Schumacher, saw something there, knew that he would be good for the job, and yeah, and this is the result. And I love it. I know a lot of people give Akiva Goldsman a really hard time for this movie and Batman and Robin, and perhaps with Batman and Robin it's deserved. I don't think it's deserved with this one at all. I like this one quite a bit. I know that you do. Whatever, that's fine.
I would give him actually an even harder time about Lost in Space, honestly.
I don't have a problem with Lost in Space.
Of course you don't.
Honestly, I would give him a harder time about Beautiful Mind than any of these movies.
Okay,
but
look, Beautiful Mind didn't. Yeah, okay. There's a whole thing there, but like Lost in Space it's Lost in Space, Mike. Come on, that's just
I liked Lost in Space when I saw it.
No.
I don't have a problem with Lost in Space.
No, see, whereas
You know?
Batman Forever, like I got caught up in the craze with everybody else and the Jim Carrey-ness of it all, and was like, oh yeah, okay, all right, I'll go along with it. And then through the years, I was kind of like, this doesn't really work. And now I'm just, sort of like outright disliking it. Lost in Space started in a bad place and has gone nowhere but down since then. It's a train wreck.
I guess I haven't revisited it nearly as much as some movies, but when I saw it, like twice in the theater in 1998, I was like, this movie's good, But yeah, I mean, but it is interesting though, because like Goldsman, here obviously was, kind of like doing something, for a director, doing something, it was I think kind of more of an assignment than, let's say a passion project, and he was just getting started and he was, working for a studio. Whereas as he gets further along in his career, you can see like other movies which are, definitely better and definitely more personal. You can see like with, let's say, Cinderella Man, and even I'm going to say like I Am Legend, things like that. I don't know. So yeah, I mean, it's cool. And he's actually directed a movie himself as well, called Winter's Tale. And
that's the one I've seen a part of it. It was actually really compelling. Like it was one of those ones where I jumped in the middle and I watched all the way to the end because I got pulled into it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's cool, now that he's, sort of like much more established, obviously, than he was back in 1995. That we're getting to see, the real Akiva Goldsman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm excited. I'm super excited that he's working on Discovery. To be honest, probably more than any other person, like including Brian Fuller. And I know that like a lot of people are like, no, but I don't know.
Well, listen. One of the things we talk about is him coming on. The way he came on to Forever and stuff like that. He's obviously a guy who works well with others. I think that's what you can learn from his time on Batman. Is he was brought in because Schumacher knew that he could get what he wanted from this writer, and so I don't think they bring Goldsman in unless Kurtzman feels that he can get the, for lack of a better word, the product that they're looking for by working with Akiva Goldsman. They know that they can talk to him, and Kurtzman can relay to him in shorthand, I'm looking for this, remember this, and we did this. And Goldsman can say, okay, I know how to get there. Let me work with everybody, and we can shape this. We can make this happen. And so I was on that bandwagon at first. It was like, oh, Akiva, Goldsman, Batman Forever, and Batman, blah, blah, blah. But I have come around to your point of view. This is a guy who can deliver what they want, and that's good to know. That means it's going to get done.
Yeah, for sure, and with good results, as we've seen on Fringe, which is a seemingly similar scenario, in terms of his role on that show. So, all right. It's been fun talking about Akiva Goldsman and his work on Batman Forever today, but that's not all we're talking about on Trek FM this week. So here's a look at what you may have missed elsewhere on the network.
Previously on Trek.fm, Earl Grey.
And then as kind of a teenager, I kind of drifted a bit from Star Trek, and I pretended one time when I went to see Star Trek Nemesis that I was actually off to see Elf instead, because that sounded cooler than seeing Star Trek Nemesis. Maybe it still is.
To the journey!
Maybe even playing it with Tuvok, who I think will be brilliant at it, and then it just constantly going brr, brr, like him just getting really annoyed. Yeah.
Tuvok would be the Operation Champ.
Yeah, he would. Yeah.
See, and then the evil holographic doctor from Equinox is singing, the reticular node's connected to the...
Yes.
Warp 5.
We should get Larry Nemeczek on, and we should do a supplemental episode where we just talk and we act like we're Tellarites and we just insult each other for the whole episode.
You would probably love it.
What do you think? I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know. That would be... I might have to get coached by our listeners.
Meta Treks.
And that's the world of language that we live in. It's not this purely referential sense of language. Like when Riker says a minuet, he doesn't just mean, oh, yeah, that thing minuet that I can point to, whatever that is on the holodeck, right?
A 17th century French dance. Maybe he wants to dance.
Riker wants to bust a move.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out these shows and discover what we're talking about in your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe. You'll find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button. That helps us out greatly and makes it easier for other listeners to find the show as they search iTunes. If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Stitcher, TuneIn, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, and of course you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website and grab the RSS link as well. We'd like to thank our associate producers, Chris Steftenagel, Norman C. Lau, and Jeff Sutter today. If you want to be like Chris, Norm, and Jeff, head on over to patreon.com and become a patron of the network. That's patreon.com/TrekFM, patreon.com/TrekFM. If you go there, you'll find our current goals and different milestone contribution levels, along with all the great perks we have for you. These perks include early access to content, exclusive content, producer credits, seats on our content development team, and more. We really appreciate any support you can give us and hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM. If you leave us a review on iTunes, you will be entered into a contest to win some prizes which were donated to us by our associate producer, Jeff Sutter. These prizes include a technical manual for Star Trek from the 70s, as well as some blueprints from the 70s that were released back in the day. So head on over to iTunes and leave us a review, and we'll read it on the air and enter you into the contest. If you want to contact us, you can find us on Twitter at TrekFM or Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. You can also find the Babel Conference on Facebook. That's you just type in the Babel Conference. That's BABEL into the search field on Facebook, and we'll pop right up. John, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, you can find me ambling around as Kessel Junkie on different social media networks. You can also find me over on the Nerd Party Network, co-hosting Aggressive Negotiations with Matt Rushing. You can find me co-hosting Words with Nerds with my pal Craig. And again, speaking of the Nerd Party Network, co-hosting a show called Great Shot Kid with the inimitable Mike Schindler.
Yeah, you can find me over there, and you can also find me on commentarytrackstars.com, where we have some commentaries and other shows, lots and lots of audio commentaries, over 200, including a commentary for Batman Forever. So go on over there and check that out. And you can also find me on Twitter at Mumbles3K. All right, well, that's it for Batman Forever. We will be back next week to talk about Alex Kurtzman's first directorial effort, People Like Us.